The following is rated NSFW. It contains strong language, spoilers, and adult situations, and may not be suitable for small children.
Order, please, order. Reels of Justice is now in session. Judge Ben Haslar presiding. All eyes for the Honorable Judge Ben Haslar. Be seated. Today we are hearing the case of Wonder Woman versus Captain Marvel. Our purpose today is to determine which of these films is superior. Before we begin, a bit of background on the two parties in question here today. The plaintiff, which is 2017's Wonder Woman, tells the story of an Amazon princess, Diana, who sets out from her island home to foil the evil god of war, Ares, during World War I. The defendant is 2019's Captain Marvel, which is set in 1995. It follows the character Carol Danvers, a former Air Force pilot who defends Earth during an intergalactic war and takes up the mantle of the all-powerful Captain Marvel. Now, in civil cases like this, the counsel is appointed to represent each film, and they will present their case to which is the superior movie. Ultimately, the jury will render its verdict, which is, in fact, the better film. The decision will hereby stand in the rankings for all listicles from now to the end of time ad infinitum. That said, Mr. Ryan, I understand you're appearing on behalf of Captain Marvel. Is that right?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, you may proceed with your opening statement, sir.
Your Honor, the fundamental question asked by the court assembled today is a challenging one, simply because I cannot make the argument that either film on trial, Wonder Woman nor Captain Marvel, are entirely great films. But we are here to determine which is better, and in that context, I can comfortably side with the latter. Both make significant inroads in terms of long overdue representation, the timing of which proves the inherent sexism of the film industry. The chronology of 9 theatrical outings for Batman and 7 for Superman before a single live-action film about iconic Amazon Diana Prince is frankly gross. The same sentiment applies to the first solo female-led installment of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, being reserved for its 21st feature, although that can be attributable to Marvel CEO Ike Perlmutter insisting that female characters don't sell toys. In a beat-for-beat comparison, Captain Marvel handily outpaces Wonder Woman. Its story is somehow more consistent, despite the necessity of jumping through hoops to unite a narrative with 20 previous installments, not to mention the story tropes that it bravely avoids, such as the obligatory romantic subplot. Wonder Woman is not without its strengths, all of which we will probably get to momentarily, but Captain Marvel succeeds greatly for not repeating its weaknesses, and said weaknesses are not hard to detect.
Okay, thank you. And Miss Nicki, I believe you are appearing in defense of Wonder Woman, is that right?
Yes, I am.
All right, let's hear your opening statement, please.
While I appreciate what Mr. Rodriguez brings to the table, I have to heartily disagree. For my money, this is the best of the DCEU movies, and depending on your stance, that may or may not mean something. But when it comes to origin stories, adventures, coming-of-age tale, and just an entertaining film, you can't get better than Wonder Woman. She has so many things that she brings to the table. She's a fierce warrior, a strong, stubborn young woman trying to prove herself to the world. And she comes across as a slightly naive stranger. But she grows in all these areas, which is something I don't think you can say about Captain Marvel. For all of the strengths of the DC, or for all the strengths of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, she is one tale amongst many, and she is bound to those. She should be able to stand on her own, and because of those bounds, I think that it is a little bit less of a movie than what you get with Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman is a story of strong young females, and visually, it tells a compelling story. You look at that, and you just know where you are. And that's whether you're talking about the Greek mythology of her origin, or when she goes into London in the late 1910s. You don't get better than that. And that's, I guess, where I begin.
All right. Well, we look forward to hearing your arguments. But to start with, we will pass it to Mr. Ryan Rodriguez. Please begin with your first piece of evidence.
Since we're going to start at the beginning, why don't we start with source material? I think that Wonder Woman is largely faithful to the source material, although it hinges on the origin of the character for the New 52, which is when DC resetted their universe back in 2012. And in doing so, they made Diana's origin go from a her mother sculpts her out of clay, which is then animated into life by Zeus. And in the New 52 origin, she's the half daughter of Zeus, which kind of eliminates part of the feminization of it. And I find that kind of disappointing. But in Captain Marvel's case, she was originally Captain Marvel is a legacy character, so it was originally a man, but the character was changed in the 1970s to Carol Danvers. And in the case of adapting it for a film, they not only feminized the character, they feminized everyone as part of her origin. So the original Captain Marvel was Walter Lawson, and it changed into Wendy Lawson, played by Annette Bening. And already that gives her a mentor that is not masculine, which already kind of subverts what the audience expectation is. And I think that that's probably one of the strongest things that the film does, even though I would argue that Wonder Woman probably exemplifies femininity and feminism in terms of thematic stuff, but in terms of the character, I think that Captain Marvel does better by this.
Question from the bench, Mr. Rodriguez.
Yes.
In the movie, Captain Marvel has blue blood because she's meant to think she's Kree. Does that tie into the origin story in the comic books at all?
Well, in the comic books, she is, if I remember correctly, she's hit by a psyche magnetron that
More
alters
comic
her
book origin
DNA.
than ever
Yeah,
was.
it's the most comic book phrase you could possibly imagine. It has nothing to do with the Tesseract or anything like that, but it is an infusion that changes her DNA to half Kree, half human. Although that was recently retconned, so now she has a alien mother that she didn't know was an alien. But that was something that was actually released after the movie, so I don't think that it necessarily pertains to this.
So in the movie, she's getting blood transfusions from Kree. Does that
Yes.
hurt or help the movie?
I think that it helps in terms of establishing the mystery of exactly who she is and why she gets her powers. I don't know that it would hurt per se, but it does also help to make her specifically coded as more alien.
Okay.
I would like to object to something regarding blood transfusions and stuff.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to say that her blood transfusions come from Jude Law's character, who that kind of takes away from her as being more feminine in that respect, since it is technically speaking a male character. So for that aspect, I feel like there's a loss there.
Okay, fair. That's totally fair. But about my accusation of changing Diana's origin, would you say that helps or hurts?
I don't see it as a thing either way. Yes, she loses a little bit of her femininity, but she's raised amongst a culture of only females, so that what she loses, DNA is only part of the story. The way she was nurtured, the way she was raised, she personifies what it is to be a female, especially in a time when women were meant to be in the kitchen. They weren't, there are so many scenes where she stands up against that. She goes into Parliament and stands up and says the most logical thing in the room.
Okay.
I guess that's all I have.
To further underscore, since we're on the tenuous subject of feminism as represented by these characters, the Bechdel test is a psychological principle that states that if two characters, preferably female characters, actually not preferably, if two female characters in a film can sit down and have a conversation that does not involve a man, then the film passes the Bechdel test. And I would like to say that Captain Marvel almost entirely passes that Bechdel test, especially with the relationship between Carol Danvers.
Does this test reflect her relating to the man, or could she be talking about a specific man, Hitler, who she doesn't know, or something like that?
No, it's I believe that looked at strictly, it doesn't matter what context the man is mentioned in or who that man is, just that it's a man.
Okay.
And in terms of the relationship between Carol Danvers and Maria Rambeau, there are several scenes in which they simply just talk about life experiences in which there is literally no hint of men mentioned whatsoever. There is no, I mean, there's, if you want to imply it, there is possibly romantic undertones, but the film never goes explicit on that degree.
And you're
But
suggesting that Wonder Woman having the villain of Ares being a man makes it fail that test?
yes, well, the first act of Wonder Woman passes the Bechdel test. However, the second two-thirds do not pass whatsoever because every single conversation that she has from that point on is with a man.
Okay.
I do think that you have to take into account of the time that it took place. You're talking about 1918. There wasn't, you're talking about a world and a time and a place when you're talking army and all that stuff. You can't escape that. There's no way that she could go from point A to point B, wherever she is, without coming into contact. And being that it is her origin, Steve Trevor is a huge part of that. But she's never seen as anything less than what she is. I mean, she constantly proves that she's worthy to be there, that she's the strongest voice in the room.
You know, the bench might agree with you, although I don't have any leanings on this. This would have to be decided by the jury. But the fact that she's put in such a time that was very male dominated to sort of shine out against all of that does sort of make a stronger statement, perhaps.
And
Okay.
I would like to add that even looking at the time, you look at what she came up against in that time and place. Yes, Carol ran up against, you know, a lot of sexism, as far as, you know, like the one pilot said, there's a reason that the word cockpit has the word cock in it. You know, those
And
kinds
everybody
of
laughs.
exactly, absolutely. Well, you should in that respect because it's a ridiculous phrase. But not to say that that isn't to downgrade those experiences, because they happened in the 90s, they happen now. But what women couldn't even vote. Like, that's even mentioned in there by Eddie Candy or Etta Candy, that you know, they want to get the vote.
Mhm.
That kind of not oppression, that kind of view of women at that time and place, I feel like is a stronger point to what we're talking about.
Okay, well, we'll let the jury decide which one speaks better to feminism, unless you have more points you'd like to bring up, Mr. Prosecutor.
Not on this particular avenue.
Okay, does the defense have any they'd like to bring up on feminism of the two characters?
Nothing at this moment, sir.
Okay, Mr. Rodriguez, your next piece of evidence, please.
Since we briefly mentioned Ares, the main villain, I think that that's pretty much of the two central flaws, and I really only believe that there are two central flaws in Wonder Woman. The probably the less heavy of the two, but we'll get to the second one, is the deficiencies of the villain. Now you have an actor in Danny Houston who plays General, I believe it's Lusendorf. I don't want to get the word wrong.
The
Ludendorff.
Yeah,
Ludendorff. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Juror.
You have in Danny Houston a capable actor, but in the character that he plays is so insufferably broad, and I would say that it contradicts the tone that the entire film is setting, in that this magical island full of Amazons is somehow grounded in reality, and then you go to Europe and the general is the most absurd caricature I think I've ever seen in a comic book film, and that is saying something because this is a genre of absurd characters. But it kind of destroys a lot of the credibility that the overall film establishes. And there's even a moment where the general and Dr. Poison, the female villain who is constructing mustard gas, they have a moment where they throw this toxin that they're crafting together into a room full of German generals and then slam the door, and they literally turn to each other and do a tee hee hee moment as if they're going hee hee, oh, this
Right,
is
they
so
gave them
much
a
fun.
mask to
It
like,
is,
oh, you can save yourselves with
yeah.
the mask, but the mask is useless.
And she literally says, I didn't tell them the mask wouldn't work. And it is the most absurd moment, I think, in the entire film. That was the moment when I saw it theatrically, and I was so on this movie's side until that one moment. And it really does degrade further from there.
Was that before or after she was in London and couldn't go through a revolving door?
That is after, I believe.
Okay.
But I did like that moment, so yeah. Fair point, though.
To the defense, do you have anything to say on Ludendorff?
I would. I think you're still talking comic book movies, and they're portraying Dr. Moreau as kind of an absolute evil. She's the Dr. Poison character. They're showing her as this. She's kind of the polar opposite of what Diana is. You know, Diana is this spirit of hope and all these things, and Dr. Moreau is kind of the complete and utter opposite of that. She sees evil everywhere she goes. She's sadistic. She doesn't give a fuck. And I think even giving the serum that she gave to Ludendorff early on is an easy way to say that he's kind of coming over to her side. And I think that kind of backs up like just that total evil. Yes, it's a bit of a caricature, but I think for that time and place, that's the way the character, they want to show that they just don't care. They don't give a fuck. They're in it for themselves and they don't care who they hurt.
And there is a third villain in spoiler alert, David Thewlis, who plays, I believe, a member of Parliament. I'm not totally sure on that one. But he does play a politician in London at the time, and he is a stealth antagonist, eventually revealing himself at the end to be Ares, god of war, who still has the dopey mustache that he has on when transforming into the Greek god, which is a little underwhelming. And it's at that point that the second problem with the film, the third act, coalesces and has a confluence with the deficiency in antagonists, in that it becomes a boss battle from a second-rate PS3 game at the same time as the entire third act is reenacting the third act of Captain America: The First Avenger, right down to the fact that there's a handsome white man named Steve who flies a plane full of explosives into the air and sacrifices himself, even though he really doesn't need to, but because we need the woman to stare at either a pocket watch or a compass with a forlorn expression.
And I believe in the case of Wonder Woman, perhaps the defense can tell me if I'm wrong, there's really no reason Steve couldn't have landed the plane somewhere else and just blown it up.
I think it was a case of the magnitude of the explosion. Like, it was such an epic, there was so much in there that if he would have let it set, it would have destroyed everything around it, including small towns and people.
Well, he could have flown anywhere, though, right? He could have flown, like, as long as he wanted to, a full tank of gas.
Maybe to Antarctica?
And to follow the logic,
the Arctic, the North Arctic for Steve
now
Rogers.
That I'm not 100% sure of. The way they made it sound, well, on that point I am unaware. I do apologize for my lack of knowledge.
Okay. Mr. Prosecutor, any more points you would like to bring up about the third act?
I think I've outlined my case as to its derivativeness, but I would like to hear defense of it.
Okay. Very well. Defense.
In regards to the third act, I would say that throughout the movie, you see Diana have this great hope about her. And there comes a point where when she's in the trench, like, she leads the battle out of the trenches and gives strength and fortitude to the troops that have been there for many months to go forth and fight. And it's one of the most epic scenes from a visual perspective, it's one of the most epic scenes of the Wonder Woman movie. When you get to the third act, she's bound up for, I will agree that Sir Patrick as Ares, he should have left the helmet on. But
could have obscured his entire face.
Oh god, that would have been, or could have been a cover. I will agree there are weaknesses in his portrayal as Ares, but she's trapped inside of I think it's tank tracks, and seeing Steve go up, it's not a forlorn look. What it is she sees his sacrifice, and it brings her to that point where she regains what she needs to find inner strength and to battle on. But the thing is, they both do that for each other, and they kind of balance each other out in critical moments, in my opinion.
Would you say that the action is serviceable? Because to me, it simply felt like a rehashing of kind of previous battle royales, especially in the DC universe, where it seems that every third act involves some incomprehensible nonsense and people just punching the shit out of each other. it seems that it's a film that actually has a heavy level of nuance and of understanding of the genre's limitations up to that point, but then it
I
kind
will
of devolves into a Zack Snyder scene.
I will agree with that, but Zack Snyder did have quite a bit of influence on the series to that point, or in the DCEU movies to that point. So
That is
to
I
some
undeniable.
believe he was a
extent,
producer on this as well, wasn't he?
Yes,
right,
he was.
and that does play into it one way or the other from that perspective. But I think you could say the same thing about quite a few Marvel movies. How many times is there a giant laser that goes up into space, or that appears, or an incomprehensible enemy that they're able to suddenly take down because reasons? I think that is a staple of comic book movies in one way, shape, or form, and there are very few exceptions. Like unless you're talking Doctor Strange or ones in that vein, I don't think you're going to find a lot of that. That is a classic trope, and where I will agree that the ending is the weakest part. That last 10 minutes is probably the weakest part of Wonder Woman. Up until that point, even when she gains great strength, it still is a serviceable movie.
Question from the bench, since we're talking about the third act. I never quite understood Ares' motivation in revealing himself to Diana, because she murdered this German general, and then Ares reveals himself to her. If he didn't do that, she would have thought she won. And further, he's like sort of going on this tangent about like him giving bad ideas to humans, and therefore that makes them bad for acting on it. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that's the way he describes his reasons for creating war and such is he wanted Zeus to see that humankind wasn't a perfect being. You could equate that to the Garden of Eden, and how Adam and Eve were not perfect, even though they should have been ideal creations. So by whispering in their ears and giving them ideas but not directly intervening, he can show that those little suggestions were enough to push men to battle and war and death and whatnot. Also, goes in to describe how like it's kind of truth from a certain point of view. When he goes into all these different places, he was trying to show. I guess it goes back to tries to show Zeus what humankind is kind of capable of, if that makes sense.
Sure, it's more
Hopefully.
biblical than Greek mythology.
That's kind of what I got
Um,
from it. Um,
And in presenting the certain point of view, I believe that's called playing the Obi-Wan card.
I would say so. Yes,
So noted,
exactly.
Mr. Prosecutor.
I
Okay, well, let's switch to Captain Marvel's third act so we can directly compare the two. Captain Marvel, she becomes pretty much invincible in the third act, and for some viewers, that might mean she there's a lack of investment. It's the Superman syndrome, where like you're not caring about her because nothing can hurt her. You're no longer on the edge of your seat. Mr.
Right.
Prosecutor, do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, I think that it's an instance of dialing down a little too hard on what the message statement of the entire film is, and that they went through great pains as they were producing Captain Marvel to tell the fan base explicitly that she is the most powerful Avenger. I mean, she's not an Avenger yet, but she clearly will be in the next movie.
Right.
But in order to in well, not in order, but in the process of doing so, I think that they might have pushed the pedal a little too much to the metal. But the scene in which she actually finds out what her true limits are in terms of her power, in the fight scene that is set to No Doubt's Just a Girl, might be my favorite scene in the entire movie. It does hit it a little too hard, and that she's seconds later she's literally pushing spaceships back into the sky and
Mm-hmm.
blowing up missiles with her hands. But at the same time, to see, after seeing 20 movies so far where the female protagonists get maybe a fraction of the screen time, except for perhaps Black Widow or the Wasp in Ant-Man and the Wasp, but to see a woman kicking that much ass that consistently at that rate is satisfying, at least to me. I don't know what it's if it kind of kicks everything into overdrive, but uh, I do appreciate it.
Okay. Miss Nicki on the defense, do you have anything to say about Captain Marvel's
Its
Third
heart
act?
was in its heart was in the right place, but I still felt like it was weak in some ways. It lacks. It feels like, to me, it kind of felt like an understanding that it was cool to see a female character kicking ass, but I still felt like the overall ending was kind of typical Marvel. It followed every other Marvel ending that's come along to this point. And I guess that's all I can really say.
Very
Although,
well.
in its defense, the third act of Wonder Woman is the standard hero versus villain one-on-one, whereas at the end of this group kick-ass fight, she faces her one-time mentor, played by Jude Law, and there is the tension of an actual showdown, but she literally just blasts him with her photon ray, and he has to whimper and scrawl backwards like a lizard on the retreat
Spoiler
and go
alert,
back
Carol
into
Danvers
his
shot first.
spaceship and launch off. He's completely emasculated, and it is such a satisfying moment of conflict resolution and completely subverting what the audience is expecting. Whereas I think Wonder Woman leans right into it and doesn't really give you any respite from that.
I guess I look at that and it felt like, I understand what you're saying and I would agree, but it didn't feel needed to me. I don't think you could have easily blasted him out of existence earlier and called it good. That mentor battle, there always comes to that. Like, if it's an evil mentor, it always comes down to that. It's always the things that you hear earlier on about controlling one's emotions and doing all these things. It always comes down to that. And I guess it was an interesting scene, but I felt like it just, the way he went out, I felt like it was a tad lame for what it could have been. He was supposed to be such a powerful character, and that whole buildup of, oh, until you can knock me down without your powers, and she just goes and he's done. I don't know. I was kind of like, golf clap in the back or something.
It was a theater moment, yes.
Totally.
Good for the theater and nothing else.
Pretty much, yeah.
All right. We'll let the jury decide about the third acts of the two. Mr. Prosecutor, do you have any other points you'd like to bring up?
Yeah, while we're on the point of characters, I'd like to transition to a comparison of casts. So,
Okay.
with Wonder Woman, you have, well, actually, let's start with Captain Marvel. With Captain Marvel, in terms of leading ladies, you have Brie Larson, who is universally recognized as one of the greatest actors of her generation, while in Wonder Woman, you have Gal Gadot, who was formerly best known as that lady
Gadot,
from The Fast
Mr.
and the Furious.
Prosecutor, Gal
It's definitely
Gadot.
not Gal Gadot, right?
It is Gal Gadot. I believed it was Gal Gadot this entire time, but it is in fact Gal Gadot.
Wow, we got
Well,
Gadot.
Well, we'll have
Anyway.
our people look into that.
If I'm wrong, then I'm wrong, but I believe I'm correct.
Very well. Please
Anyway,
continue.
Miss Gadot, whatever you want to call her, was formerly best known as that lady from The Fast and the Furious who obtained the villain's fingerprints when he groped her ass. And I think that in terms of just a point-for-point comparison, one is definitely a stronger actor than the other, although I think that Miss Gadot gives a terrific
Let's call her
performance,
Gal from
especially
here on out to avoid
that
confusion.
that Gal gives an extraordinary performance, especially compared to the meager amount she was given to do in Batman versus Superman, where she's also kind of a little over-sexualized and kind of portrayed with the male gaze. But even extending past that, I can think of maybe 2 or 3 other actors in Wonder Woman that I appreciated seeing, like Chris Pine, who's always at least reliable, and perhaps, I don't know, Robin Wright. But then when you look at Captain Marvel, you have Samuel L. Jackson, you have Ben Mendelsohn, who somehow takes a character that the Skrulls have been this easily marginalized standard villain in Marvel Comics for decades at this point, and he manages to take the fact that he's Ben Mendelsohn, which means you think he's going to be the villain, since he did it in Ready Player One, he did it in Rogue One, a lot of things with the word one in the title. You immediately look at Ben Mendelsohn and you think, well, that guy is clearly the villain, and he manages to not only get your sympathies, but maybe steal the entire film. And that's out of a cast that is already stacked. Like, you have Maria Rambeau, played by, God, her name is escaping me at the moment. Lashana Lynch, sorry. You have Clark Gregg returning as my favorite character in the MCU, Phil Coulson. You have Lee Pace returning from Guardians of the Galaxy, although he's pretty
Briefly.
inessential to the plot.
Briefly.
Yeah, it's more of a glorified cameo, but I still appreciate seeing him anyway as a fan of Pushing Daisies. You have Annette Bening, the amazing Annette Bening as Wendy Lawson. You have Gemma Chan, who is in there for only maybe 2 minutes, but is always fantastic. You have Jaimon Hansu, who another glorified cameo, but I still love seeing him in every movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's another case of the overstuffed Marvel cast, but I think the fact that because the movie is so
They're casting a wide net. Is that what you'd argue?
yeah, exactly. I mean, you don't go into a Marvel movie and expecting parody in the cast. You expect it to be fully stocked to the gills. Like even Black Panther is a fantastic cast, but admittedly overstuffed. But since we expect that, at least they overstuff it with some of the best actors of their generation.
Sure. All right, pass that to the defense. Do you have anything to say on behalf of Wonder Woman's cast or against Captain Marvel's?
I will say that being it's a Marvel movie, as the prosecution has said, you expect a big cast. Marvel or DC isn't always known for that. You know, there are faces you might recognize, but it's not quite in the same vein as what you would see in a Marvel movie. And Gal, in my mind, she is the thing that...
Please.
If it pleases the court, it is Godot.
Godot.
Ah, so I was
Godot.
close.
Yeah,
You were
so
both
not
right.
dot.
The hard
Yeah.
T, but I got the
Godot.
hard T. That's what matters.
You did.
Gal
There is a
Gadot.
T. Godot.
Godot. Okay. Gal Gadot, I believe, acts circles around Brie Larson. And I understand that the characters are coming from entirely different levels. In fact, in many ways, they're night and day. Captain Marvel is taught, as we see from the beginning of the movie, not to show emotion because that kind of screws with her powers. And Diana is definitely one that is very, very emotional from the very beginning. Whether you're talking hope, whether you're talking anger, that is one of the central pillars of her character. But I think that I've seen people say her acting is stiff. I don't see it that way. I think she plays it incredibly well. Chris Pine as Steve Trevor is, again, I think, very well cast, and I think he does an incredibly good job with the role. And honestly, I got to tell you, I don't mind seeing him topless.
You must have an enormous Schwanstucke.
I mean, Connie Nielsen and Robin Wright, they both play her mentor and her mother with a level that I think serves the plot very well. The malice that comes across with Dr. Moreau, you get that. She doesn't have to say a word and you can see it, regardless. She's got, a piece of porcelain on her face, but you can feel that. I think, David Lewis, you get that sense of like a classic British guy, and eventually you start to wonder because he does show up in the right place, but I think he plays that kind of unassuming British politician very well. Now, as Ares, again, that's left up to people. The best thing for me that came out of Captain Marvel was Maria Rambeau. I think she was more compelling to me than Brie Larson's character. I would have loved to have seen her, like a movie about her, more so than I wanted to see about Captain Marvel, to be honest. I mean, Samuel L. Jackson was good, but you expect that. He's been in several of these movies.
He's always good. He's a national treasure.
Absolutely. I mean, Agent Coulson, too. He plays the role so well. That's why they keep bringing him back from the dead. And that's the cast of an MCU
Underneath
movie.
heavy CGI, but yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's the only part that I would actually say that the CGI is dodgy.
Yeah.
But he's a Skrull.
The aging of, for part of it. But not for the entire thing. There's a hairpiece on him that is not great.
Yeah, that's most hairpieces, if we're being honest.
So noted.
Recognized.
Yes. I would like to say, if we're on the subject of makeup and things like that,
sure.
I was rather unimpressed with the Skrull makeup. Given a Marvel movie, I guess I expected a little bit stronger, appliances. They weren't as good as I had hoped. They didn't look like they belonged in that respect.
I have to disagree with you on that one. I think that's actually the best makeup work in the entire film. Specifically because the Skrulls, especially if you're a Marvel Comics fan, that the Skrulls. The Skrulls they're deliberately designed to look like the villain, even though the subtleties of the situation will reveal that the Kree are often just as bad as them, as they actually have slavery still in as part of their heritage and as part of something that is still ongoing on the planet Hala at that point. But they managed to take the design of the Skrulls so that you believe for the first maybe 40 minutes that they are the villain because they still look villainous. But once it's revealed that Ben Mendelsohn is actually probably the second protagonist, it doesn't look as frightening anymore, even though nothing changes about that makeup. And the ability to have him express both being a villain and a hero and still actually have expressions within that makeup, I think is actually quite remarkable.
And of course, no one's threatening when slipping from a Slurpee cup, right?
No, I will
Precisely.
say I maybe should clarify. I meant the actual way that the makeup is done, not the character design, but like the appliances themselves. They just didn't feel as good as some of the previous versions. And the ability to emote through makeup or through appliances especially is one of the things that you expect from a budget or from a movie with a budget that big, if I might say.
Yeah, that might be fair. Okay, Mr. Prosecutor, any other points?
Just one last one. In terms of technical production, both of these films had a budget of at least 150 million, if Wikipedia is to be believed, and it
It
often
is
isn't.
always
But
to be believed, sir.
okay, well, if the judge says that, I will echo that. It is always to be believed. In terms of allocating the money properly, the special effects in Wonder Woman, depending on the scene, are pretty wonky, and that's not the movie's fault. Simply because of the character's costume, it is still not uh, feasible yet for CGI to replicate human skin and
Mhm.
human movement. Yet the fact that Wonder Woman's costume leaves so much flesh exposed on her arms and legs and the top half of her body, it's easy to see through the seams of CGI. And with Captain Marvel, there are several shots, and I was just observing this today by rewatching the film, that I know were augmented with CGI, but I can't honestly tell if it's a CGI double or if it was actually grafted onto the actress.
Yeah, I do know that's a technique they use a lot by like actually shooting the person's actual head and just superimposing it on.
Yes.
And that would be easy to do for Captain Marvel since, like as you noted with Wonder Woman, she's got like arms showing, and Captain
Yep.
Marvel doesn't. Okay, Defense. Do you have anything to say about the special effects or technical production?
I will say, from a perspective of movies, the weakest part of the CGI falls again in Wonder Woman falls to the third act, where we get Ares. Obviously, he's no better than Steppenwolf, if we're being honest. But in simple ways, like Goose the cat, there were very few scenes where that was believable to me, as far as like in simple things like
Oh.
being a cat.
But
I
the hentai
apologize.
tentacles. Oh, they're
Well, no, not even
fantastic.
At least
technicals.
that was my favorite part.
I don't have an issue with the tentacles. It's just the cat himself. Like, he didn't look like he was real most of the time.
Well, to be
I
fair, he wasn't, because Brie Larson is
you
allergic to
think?
cats.
Well,
Oh,
I would hope
really?
that.
Yeah.
Really?
The cat is only real in scenes in which Samuel L. Jackson is holding him, or in scenes in which Brie Larson does not appear. Otherwise, it is a stand-in cat. And if you watch the blooper reel, there are several scenes that are played with the stand-in cat, and it is literally just a stuffed cat.
Well, that's why it
Yeah,
didn't
not
look
even
real
like
then.
a dog.
That would have been great if it was a small dog half the time.
That's a
The bench does
schnauzer.
agree
but they
that
put
Goose didn't
CGI fur on it.
always look natural.
Aren't there hypoallergenic cats or something
There
like
are,
that?
but they're
I
normally
suppose there
hairless.
are, but you know.
Oh,
No,
order,
just add
order,
a
please.
hairless
Order.
cat in. All right.
Order in the court.
I'll take a cheeseburger.
Okay. So that was your last point, Mr. Rodriguez?
Yes.
Okay, I'd like to pass it to the defense then to bring up anything else that needs to be addressed.
I would like to point out the one thing that I understand that they're trying to make the point that they're in a certain time frame, and you get that with both of these movies. It's one of the things that is kind of cool to see. But the way that the 90s smacks you in the face throughout the entirety of Captain Marvel, I just there is no subtlety. And again, that's kind of a Marvel staple. Like, you get something, you're going to get it in the face. But in case you forget you're in the 90s, Blockbuster, Radio Shack, 9 Inch Nails, pagers,
Dial up.
Exactly. You're never without reminders of that point. And although you do get that in Wonder Woman, I don't feel like it's more subtle. It's not there as part of a character, it's just there as part of the scene. It doesn't distract.
Yeah, no one's like getting Prince Albert in a can or anything like that.
Exactly. I
Well,
mean,
you
I will
better
say,
let him
though,
out.
To be fair, in retrospect, the 90s were actually pretty loud. So I would say that it hits that note quite well. But that's just my opinion.
I won't disagree, but even some things are too much on the head. Like having the song by No Doubt "Just a Girl," it's too much. Like it's too much for that scene in my perspective. You could have any song there, and I feel like it's just a little too on the nose.
I don't disagree, but I also think that's the best scene in the film.
I'm not disagreeing with you on this scene. I just think that it's definitely a little over the top. The
On
other
the
thing,
nose is how this prosecutor likes it.
I'd say that's for sure. The fish out of water, both of the characters deal with this, but I feel like the moments of awkward humor come across a little bit better, and it plays a little bit more so. I know that Captain Marvel does have more understanding of the world around her, but it feels like she's winking at the camera every time she's like, oh, well, where's the communications sector here? And all these things. It comes off as a little, I don't know. It's like she's winking at you every time she does it.
Okay.
It's a fair point, but I will say that I like being winked at.
Well, I would hope so. I mean, Brie Larson is a very attractive person.
That is true.
And the fact that she destroys a jukebox, in my opinion, is a complete and utter, it's a travesty. And I think she should be brought up on charges.
That's true. That was not her jukebox. That was someone else's jukebox.
I will concur, but add that a pinball machine is also destroyed, and I have strong feelings about that.
Well, then you should come over to the defense side. We have cookies.
Plenty of room.
Sorry.
Go ahead. No, please.
The only other thing I would say is, looking at these two movies side by side, you look at Captain Marvel, and it is an MCU movie, and it should be. It's a 21st movie in the series. It follows from shooting to layout to special effects to storyline. It falls within that realm. Everything is pretty much shot the same as every other Marvel movie. It has like the same kind of progression. And I think the main thing that gives Wonder Woman an edge is the fact that it kind of follows its own path. And yes, it has tropes, but it isn't linked to anything else quite in the same way as Captain Marvel is. The only place that you really get the sense that it's connected to the next story is at the very end, when she has the glass picture of her and her team from 1918.
Yes, in the very beginning to set it up.
The framing
true,
sequence.
Okay, Mr. Prosecutor?
Well, to that point, I think I admire Captain Marvel a lot more than I would give credit to Wonder Woman in that case, simply because to come into a movie and have to address 10 years of serialized storytelling and still be able to subvert things, I think is a triumph of its own. And the fact that Wonder Woman collapses where it does is a little more shocking, considering that it really doesn't have a lot of heavy lifting to do narratively in terms of fitting into the overall story. All we need to know is that she had something previous to Batman vs. Superman. She lost it. Now she's sad and jaded. You could literally insert anything at that point. But Captain Marvel has to hit not only specifically addressing 20 movies previous, but also then be a prequel to movies that haven't even happened yet, and still manage to do that and find surprises is one of the most consistently enjoyable things about it for me.
I would like to point out that I would say that all these stories beforehand do have some kind of a basic overarching thing that they know that they need to accomplish. The rest is relatively open based on Captain Marvel's overarching mythology. The path that Diana travels as she goes from, naive princess on Thermopylae to the end where she
Themyscira.
Themyscira, sorry. So Diana's journey from naive, princess on Themyscira to her at the end, she's able to see that men do have good and bad in them, that it's more complicated than just good versus bad. There's shades of gray. And I think that growth and change is what makes that a better movie.
I always felt that Wonder Woman was a bit more about that sort of symbiosis. It wasn't like really about like men versus women. It was just the character being in this harsh world, and she's the one that's meant to like shine above it.
I would agree. Thank you.
Okay, any more points you would like to bring up?
I kind of covered my stuff. I covered topless Chris Pine, so.
Your duty has been done, and it has been noted in the log. All right, and Mr. Prosecutor, I assume nothing else?
The prosecution rests.
Very well. All right, then you may proceed with your closing statement, Mr. Rodriguez.
While Wonder Woman's message of female empowerment is inarguably stronger than Captain Marvel's, it does not sufficiently compensate for the film's most glaring deficiencies. Captain Marvel, while occasionally middle of the road, but not often, has something that Wonder Woman eventually evades: consistency. Consistency in story, consistency in characterization, consistency in technical production, and consistency in performance. If the members of the jury are counting along, that is a ratio of 4-1 in favor of Captain Marvel. Determining which film is better is ultimately a geometry problem, and there is no calculation that concludes 1 is greater than 4, depending on the state in which you were educated. Honorably fulfill your civic duty and vote in favor of geometry and consistency. The prosecution rests.
Oh, the prosecutor's playing towards me being a math major. Very, very good. Defense, your closing argument, please.
Well, I was apparently raised with different kinds of education because, like in all Marvel movies, Captain Marvel relies on a certain kind of humor, and especially after following up Batman vs. Superman, I would say that Wonder Woman fires on all cylinders, bringing humor, story, and emotion to the table. It's different than Captain Marvel, an epic tale for a DC legend. Captain America isn't less of a story, but it's a 21st in a line of tales, and that's where its greatest faults lie. Greatest faults lie. It's bound to have to carry on instead of being able to blaze its own path. Wonder Woman leaves me with more on every level. It's just a better tale that I wanted to revisit, and I didn't feel the need to do that with Captain Marvel.
Okay. Very eloquent. Thank you very much. Gentlemen of the jury, you have heard the testimony brought forth today. Now it is your turn to render a verdict. Mr. Schlender, you have been elected the foreman. Please lead the jurors into the jury room and deliberate.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Don't touch me.
No, get in the room, Maynard. Just. All right. We heard a very convincing case from both parties. Let's start breaking it down. Let's start with you, Rob. What are you thinking?
I thought they both made interesting points about sort of the derivative nature of Captain Marvel being just similar to other MCU movies, which I do agree with, and it is overly 90s. I do agree with that. I did have to disagree with judging the final fight with Jude Law. I liked that they deprived us of that. I thought it was funny. You already got kind of a big epic fight with Marvel fighting all the rest of the Krees, so I didn't feel like I missed anything with Jude Law. As far as Wonder Woman, I thought there were some missed opportunities there to really attack it. I think the defense for Wonder Woman mentioned a slightly naive stranger. And to me, that's one of my biggest problems with Wonder Woman is she's an extremely naive stranger throughout the entire film. She never learns anything, right? I mean, I think it was said earlier that if Ares hadn't shown up when he did, she would have thought she won. I think it's the opposite. If Ares hadn't shown up when she did, she would have thought she lost, right? To me, the most beautiful moment in Wonder Woman comes after she kills Ludendorff and all the men are still fighting. And she realizes, shit, it's not a god of war that makes men fight. Men fight because men fight. And it's this great moment. I think it's probably the most intelligent moment in the entire movie. And they undermine it 5 minutes later when Ares walks on and goes, aha, you didn't get the right guy. There still is a god of war, and it's me making them all fight. And then at the end of the movie, after she kills Ares, he was right. It was him making them all fight because they all hug, and then there's an armistice and the war's over. So it was a god of war making everybody fight instead of it just being the natural inclination and nature of man. And I thought they totally undermined their smartest point and most beautiful point right there. I also dislike that Wonder Woman really never had anything that she had to actually figure out, right? I mean, Ares walks up to her and turns himself in on a silver platter, going, I'm Ares, and explains to her right there that after he destroys her sword and for the second time gives her absolutely no hope, she is defeated, he tells her, you're the god killer. And just puts his defeat on a silver platter to her, just hands it to her. And to me, that's what makes Wonder Woman unforgivable. Otherwise, it's a really beautiful movie, but that third act just keeping Diana naive, I think is the perfect word. She just stays naive. If the villain didn't hand everything to her on a platter, she wouldn't have figured it out. And also hiding your dress, a sword in the back of your dress in the middle of a party that like 30 or 40 people would have seen.
Well, someone's dancing with you and holding your back.
Exactly, is super silly. So I'd say that those points to me make Wonder Woman a worse movie than, yeah, Captain Marvel's derivative. Yeah, it's overly 90s. You know, it's about the Tesseract again. It's very similar to a lot of those previous movies about the Infinity Stones. I'd say that's a stronger loss. So right now I'm leaning towards voting for Marvel as the better movie.
All right. And Big Ben, what are you thinking, my friend?
Well, for me, this is sort of a case of which do I like better? A movie that hits a very, very high note and then just drops very, very sharply versus a movie that hits a pretty average note and keeps it steady throughout the end to a fairly satisfying conclusion. I really like the No Man's Land scene in Wonder Woman because especially like in the scape of the DC universe, everything's like very grim and dark. And don't get me wrong, I like Batman, and I didn't like what they did with Superman, but I liked that we had like a superhero that's just like fighting to do the right thing because it's in her nature to. We haven't seen that in DC for a while. So that was a very great moment, and it had a great lead up to that. But that third act, my colleague here underscored it pretty rightly. I think it is very, very bad. I just lose all investment I had in the film in those moments. And that's why I kind of disliked the film as much as I did, because it had me. I was with it. With a couple of silly moments, sure. I like the sword in the back, and she finds a dress easy and doesn't have to sneak in, and some of the fish out of water bits. And
you hate that revolving door.
Yeah, and that revolving door. But other than that, yeah, it had me. I was pretty invested, and then it just lost it entirely. Whereas Captain Marvel, it's got Sam Jackson, who's just nailing every line he's delivered. And I can't really think of any flaws in it that aren't like all encompassing. They're just like those little nitpicks that I was mentioning in Wonder Woman. But it doesn't really have that moment either where I'm really at the edge of my seat. Like the great judge noted, like she gets overpowered at the end. So I'm not really, invested anymore. I've always hated when people have that sort of Superman syndrome where nothing can stop them.
At least Superman has a weakness.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Captain Marvel doesn't even seem to have one.
Yeah, and especially after Endgame. It's just, what can stop her right now? I have no idea.
You'd have to emotionally attack her, make her not want to fight.
Captain Marvel has historically been a very, very strong character in lots of Marvel permutations. Like in the X-Men, the animated series, that's how Rogue got her powers, which, just going to throw that in there because I like that show. So I think you guys are making some good points. I also wanted to say that Wonder Woman did everything Superman did, but backwards and in heels. But that's a good one. I like that one. All right, so
you rehearsed that in the mirror before coming in. I saw you.
No, but I wrote it down about halfway through so I could say it later. The thing is, the one thing I like about Wonder Woman is like it's kind of like a different lived-in world, and we get World War One, which really excited me. I like World War One. It's one of the it doesn't get too much play in a lot of like movies, comics, literature, things like that. Obviously, there's some very
Sure, but they paint all the Germans like it's World War II.
Yeah,
That was what
they're
I was
very
going to
Nazi.
say. Like they're very Nazi like. Actually, Mr. Maynard and I were doing some research because of the lady, the poison lady, and the actual guy who invented mustard gas lived a full and happy life after the war, and actually ended up winning a Nobel Prize. So like it's a bit of a different thing. So they were really acting more like Nazis instead of like acting like the last like European continental war, which World War One kind of was, but and then World War Two being like more of the first modern war, it was kind of bridging that gap, but without
Especially
changing.
Dr. Poison, who tests things on her own
Yeah,
people.
yeah, exactly. Like that's a bit. That's not quite what we'd be expecting from World War One Germans. Definitely what we'd be expecting from World War Two Germans.
Barely
But
any helmets with spikes on them, too.
yeah, that's a good point as well, or lack of point in this case. But I think one of the problems I also had with Captain Marvel, as it was brought up, was like she can't stand on her own, not necessarily as a character, but like as a movie itself. It's such a rehash of the Marvel formula, and the stakes couldn't be lower because we know Endgame is right around the corner. And then you say, well, what if you watch the movie in a vacuum? But you can't really watch it in a vacuum because it's so interconnected to the rest of the movies. Like Wonder Woman, you could watch as a standalone film. Obviously, they have the things where Batman sends her the picture, and obviously that's the tie-in and everything. But it can stand on its own.
But as far as low stakes, can't you say the same thing about Wonder Woman, because she appears in BVS, so she's going to survive. I mean,
I don't think
we always
I don't
know
think
in
anyone's
superhero
gonna die.
movies. Yeah, we always know in superhero movies the superhero will be fine, but when you do a prequel kind of thing like this, then you really know.
Yeah, I think, and I think one of the things they did to mitigate that would be killing Wonder Woman's love interest there, because normally in comics and everything, he does not die. Steve Trevor tends to live. So him getting killed off, I thought was very
Well,
interesting.
if he
And
gets killed off, you don't see him
I
die on
understand.
screen.
I understand the quibbles with like why would he blow up the plane the way he did and things like that, and it could very well be to justify that he did jump out, and maybe now he has amnesia, and we'll find that out in Wonder Woman 2. But if you just take the movie as it stands right now by itself, you have to assume he's dead. So that was an interesting way to go about it, and I got to agree the '90s stuff in Captain Marvel is just so over the top. I didn't think, and none of the characters came across as likable. Annette Bening was great, though. I think that would have been a much better point for the for the Captain Marvel side to focus on, because she was pretty fantastic. Always like seeing Annette Bening and things.
I mean, I don't like the Blockbuster and Radio Shack stuff, but I don't mind the soundtrack. I know, like, I'm Just a Girl was brought up, and like the movie takes place in '95, and it's a 1995 song. So
if anything, I would have liked more '90s songs and less jukeboxes and brands and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I like when Waterfalls come on from TLC. I like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that wasn't too bad. I don't really have too many quibbles about the soundtrack. I didn't like the Just a Girl fight thing. I know
I didn't either. I agree, was on way on the nose.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the defense on that one. It's just like oh, come on. It's like how many like winks and nods and like tongue in cheek, and and I just start getting burned out on like the Marvel quip fest. Everyone's got to like be smirky and smiley. It's like there's just such a fundamental lack of sincerity from all the characters. It's exhausting. It's like 21 movies of this. It's like you can't capture that magic that like Captain America literally had in the first Avenger, when he actually was like caring and wanted to do these things. Now it seems like everyone's just kind of going through the motions.
Mendelsohn, I thought, had that kind of sincerity
as the Skrull leader.
Yeah,
Yeah, but even then he had those kind of like winks and nods and like, we're doing this and like with the Slurpee drink and things like
Oh
that.
yeah, well that's
It's
Reservoir Dogs, right? That was definitely a Reservoir
and,
Dogs
yeah,
reference.
it's just like,
It is.
and again too, it's just that's very tiresome. It's like, can't we just have a sincere movie? Like everyone, like they gotta try to like put this like ironic buffer between everything, just in case, like, oh, heaven forbid we want to make a movie that's actually fun and serious and enjoyable all at the same time. No, no, no. We gotta make sure that we're winking, that we're all in on the joke too, so it's okay. And Wonder Woman did that a little bit, but not as bad as Captain Marvel. And it did have all those problems you mentioned in the third act. But I am gonna stop talking and say that
Well,
I'm
what do you
coming
think
down.
about the third act of Wonder Woman?
Oh, I agree. I did not like. I basically agree with your assessment, and like I think it would have been very profound if she kills him, and then it turns out like, oh, well, there you go. It was the evil that men do. It was not
And
the
I just
god. And
murdered
then
an unarmed man.
I mean, but okay,
well,
I mean, yeah, for sure, exactly. Like she kills a
well,
man based on assumptions that she doesn't confirm too. And let's talk too about screenwriting. How difficult would it have been to have Sir Patrick, the Ares, have given some sort of light hint at the beginning when they're first conversating that she could have struck or realized there at that moment so that she figures out his identity instead of him walking up and giving it. I mean, to me, that's the laziest screenwriting in the world. It would have easily been able to set up some kind of clue earlier that she connects the dots later herself and figures it out herself.
yeah, you could say that's lazy screenwriting, but then like the whole Captain Marvel movie's lazy screenwriting. It's just such another generic cookie cutter Marvel movie. It's like we've seen this before, and then and everyone's just waiting for Endgame. It's like they're just trying to
That's for sure.
squeeze out one more. What was it that
I
we
would
said
have
that
I would have released Marvel.
The wasp in there too.
milk
I,
it until the milk turns crimson?
well,
Well, I tell you what, it is beyond crimson for Captain Marvel.
I
At
would
that
have
point.
I would have released Captain Marvel after Endgame.
Yeah, but that's not what happened, and that
No,
you
but
know
I
what
think
I
it's what
mean.
they should have done.
Yeah, but I don't think that would even be enough. I think it's fair to say like
Well,
maybe a lot of
then you're
people
just
had.
saying stop making MCU movies. They're not going to do that.
Well, no, but I am saying that franchise fatigue is a thing, and it was like at least DC at least felt like they were shaking things up, trying something different. I mean, because like I guess we gotta get it on record right now. The best comic book movie ever is Wes Craven's Swamp Thing, and none of these will ever touch that. So I'm coming down. I'm coming down on Wonder Woman right now. Like that gets my vote.
So you think Wonder Woman's the better one?
I think Wonder Woman is the better between the two.
Okay. I think Captain Marvel, while middling, while suffering from being derivative of the MCU, I agree with that, just doesn't fall into the awful pitfalls that third act of Wonder Woman does. And to me, subsequently makes a great hero look naive, like not just a fish out of water. It makes her look stupid, and Wonder Woman didn't deserve to look stupid in her first movie.
It was her first adventure out into the
She
land of
speaks
man.
every single language in the world. She should know plenty
know
about
very
the
well
world of men.
There's a difference between intelligence and wisdom. That's why there are different stats in Dungeons and Dragons.
Right, and she didn't show
was
either in this movie. She didn't show either.
because she's learning. It's a completely different world for her now.
And how come she knows
it's
how to deflect bullets when she's never seen guns before on her island? But she knows how to
she
do
did
it.
see a bullet whiz right past her head and killed her friend, and that's what shocked her. Like, oh my god, I need to stop these things because they're not here.
But she has no ability
like,
to train against deflecting bullets.
No, but that because she's the weapon. It's her latent abilities coming forward, just like what Captain Marvel had. Her latent abilities coming forward. Being
anyway, I'm voting for Captain Marvel.
I had a feeling you would.
I didn't know it would
Big
come to
Ben?
me. I should have voted earlier. I don't know. For me, the third act is just such an important thing in any story. It's the reason you sat there for the whole time, and it's got to deliver. And I don't know why they thought they even had to pull the wool over our eyes. I don't know why they thought we had to have this surprise ending that's, he was dead the whole time. This didn't seem like it was necessary. I not having Ludendorff or whatever his name is, the German guy, be the villain, I'm fine with that, but doing that twist, it did not work. It did not work for her being the god killer either. I have no idea why this sword was then enshrined up and everyone told her she was the god killer. I don't know why the people on her island were like trying to stop her from doing the thing she was created to do.
Yeah.
Everything just doesn't work retroactively with that third act. And while I do agree Captain Marvel is not a perfect movie, nor one of the best Marvel movies, that third act just kills it for me. So I'm going to have to vote for Captain Marvel.
All right, then. Very well. Let us go tell our great judge how we ruled.
All rise. Be seated. All right, Mr. Foreman, what was your verdict?
Your Honor, we find in favor of Captain Marvel over Wonder Woman.
All right, so let it be noted in all comparisons that Captain Marvel is a better film than Wonder Woman, and I sentence the creators of Wonder Woman to look into screenwriting on how to convincingly do a third act. Court is adjourned.
Nicki, would you care to share your thoughts on today's verdict?
Well, I can't say that I agree, but I understand the court's ruling, and I'm gonna go check out Topless Chris Pine again, and more in the
I'm sure we all
Richard
will.
Pine. I know I will.
Thank you. And here comes Mr. Rodriguez, cocksure as always. Mr. Rodriguez, how did you feel about the jury's verdict?
I'm still reeling from it, to be honest. I haven't won a case up until this point, despite having better arguments and liking the movies less or more, depending on the argument. But I will accept the verdict because I don't want them to change their minds at the last second. So I'll just say thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Arrogant response as usual, as we've come to expect from Mr. Rodriguez. That's all the time we have for today. Let's toss it back to our post-trial analysis back in the studio.
And there we go.
All right, that was a
really
great one.
good.
And
Very good.
And Ryan won one. I wasn't really keeping track, but okay.
Amazing! How did that happen? I'm such a loser.
No, very, very good arguments. I gotta say, I was leaning towards Wonder Woman a little bit, but I gotta say, Nicki, you pushed me over the line. I was like, you know what? I'm sticking with Wonder Woman. And
I appreciate that. I
God,
hope
Captain
I didn't
Marvel
suck.
They're not great movies, though. They're not great movies.
No, definitely not.
Captain Marvel, I think, is the only MCU movie that I didn't like by the first day it was released, because I felt like I saw it once, and that was really all I needed. And I agree there was franchise fatigue going on, but everyone just wanted Endgame. Just like get to
because Endgame was like 2 months later or something. I mean, it was like right around the corner.
Yeah,
Actually,
like
less than 2 months.
I liked Ant-Man and the Wasp. I was good with that. No, I enjoyed it. And so to me, that gave me that good little refresher 6-month break after it. But Captain Marvel just came off. It was too close to Endgame there. They probably should have pushed it off and made it after.
Or before, like way before.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yes,
but they should have made
Wonder
it 5
Woman
years previous.
Wonder Woman just made me so mad because I like Wonder Woman. I like Wonder Woman a lot. And to make her they made her stupid. Like, was there not a reason she couldn't have figured out Ares' identity herself? And that makes me mad.
Don't blame you there. I will say that in the grand scheme of like female MCU characters, I wish they gave Scarlet Witch the due that she deserves, because her versus Captain Marvel, she's such more of a compelling character.
I agree with that.
Or why Black Widow so late in the game too? That would have been a good film to like do somewhere after the first Avengers.
Oh
yeah, Black Widow should have been a Phase 1.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's what Joss Whedon was pushing for, but they kept pushing it back.
Yeah, and that's. I mean, you're talking. I mean, not to make a point, but you're talking about a room of old white dudes that's looking at things from a very 80s perspective and not a 2020 or 2010s perspective.
No, I think that's a total fair point to make.
I hate rooms full of white dudes.
It's like I
There's
said,
nothing wrong with rooms full of white dudes. It's old white dudes. No, I kid. It's not that.
In my opening argument, it's why I pointed out that they didn't make a female movie for 10 years because the CEO literally thought that women don't sell toys.
Of course not.
And that is that's an encapsulation of the entire industry, but especially the film industry.
Well, and you look at the last
did Captain Marvel sell a lot of toys though?
I don't know, to be honest. I mean, it sold a
Do
lot.
they even make any?
Yeah.
I honestly don't know. I mean, probably even if it did, it probably didn't sell as well as Endgame because Endgame has 900 characters in it. But
I mean, Star
I'm sure
Wars
they
had a
sold
female
lot of
lead,
merchandise.
and
Yeah.
Star Wars had a female lead, and the Black series certainly sold a lot of toys.
Well, there you go. But you look at like the female movies or female-led superhero movies that came to this point. You've got Supergirl, you've got Elektra. I mean, and Catwoman, like
Catwoman.
weird ass Catwoman. I mean, for God's sake, that's not a very good track record as far as good, solid films to start with. I mean, you have to start with a good base.
And all of them are basically, well, the male version sold well, so let's do the female character who's on the side of the male, because that way
And
we
not
can
like
at least
give
get
it
a
our full
prefix in
backing
there.
either, or full
Yeah.
budget, or full or a team of writers.
Right. Well, and when you
Precisely.
take like the female Ghostbusters, like you don't let them try and stand on their own. Don't give them anything that's unique. It's just let's do a female version of this movie that we know has sold well and really piss off everybody.
Right. Let's just swap it. Easy peasy.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, they know how to
Thanks for
pander.
coming on the show. Sorry we gave you a guilty verdict.
No, it's okay. I hope I didn't suck.
No, you were
Oh
awesome.
no,
Brain
you
kinda
did,
went blank.
you did very well. You did very well. So, Nicki, what do you got going on? I believe you have a YouTube channel.
Yeah, so I do random, obscure, and kind of straight up bad movies on my YouTube channel. It's Trivial Theater. You stop by, say hi. It's a lot of fun, and I try and keep things interesting. You can also find me on Twitter, trivia_chick. Chick is spelled without a K. So, and you'll also find a couple of collabs
Trivia
there
chic.
with. Yep, basically. But you'll also find on my YouTube channel a couple of collabs with your excellent prosecutor.
Yes,
Based
it
on
was
Mr.
so much
Science
fun.
Theater.
I have said before that Nicki makes my favorite show on YouTube, and I will say it again here for everybody to hear. Please go to the channel. It's fantastic.
Eat it, Will Wheaton on tabletop.
What sort of bad movies have you done?
Oh man, all kinds. Everything from 1970s Spider-Man, the trailer lead for the show from the 70s. I've done crazy shit like one called Microwave Massacre, where a guy slathers a woman in mayo and tries to eat her.
Oh my gosh. That was
Killer Condom.
Yeah, Killer Condoms. There's one about a bunch of killer donuts. There's one about an inbred family that tries to take a whole bunch of people out. The 1980s He-Man is in there. I
Banana
cover
Splits.
Yeah, there's such a range. A couple of Hitchcock movies that are just ones I really enjoy. You'll find a wide range. So something for everybody.
something
if you're
for
into if you're into obscure or random or just bad movies, it's a good place to come.
I like Supeda Man though.
What now?
I like Supeda Man, the Japanese Spider-Man.
Oh yeah, well no, this isn't Japanese one. This is actually an American. It'd be like the Incredible Hulk from the 70s. It was made about that same time.
It's the wrong 70s Spider-Man. No.
Is it
Exactly.
the Nicolas
But
Hammond one?
But I do want to do the Japanese one. I think that'd be cool.
What's the format on your show? Like, how do you break them down?
So I kind of start with kind of a synopsis breakdown, but I do it in a really sarcastic way, and then I kind of give my breakdown of it, lay out trivia, and just kind of talk about my thoughts about it, if you should see it or not, and then that's kind of it. But I do it in an animated format inside of a theater, so like everything is built from scratch. It's actually pretty neat. So
Who animates it?
Fantastic show.
I do.
Ooh, self-animating.
Kind of a one-woman band.
She's more than just reviews, folks.
More than meets the eye.
Well, that's awesome, and that's Trivial Theater
Yep.
on YouTube. That is fantastic. I'm sure a lot of people will check that out.
Uh,
I know I've watched a few videos. I watched the one you did with Ryan, and it was absolutely great.
Oh, thank you. Well, Ryan makes it always a lot of fun, and he knows his shit, so...
That's why we
This
keep
is
him
true.
around. We always
That's
have
why we pay him
questions.
the big bucks.
Oh, yeah. you can
For how to
imagine
pronounce
so.
Godot, apparently.
They're Disney dollars, but yeah, they're the big bucks.
Hey,
Yeah, we're
better than Monopoly money.
That's true.
But Ryan did keep us waiting on Godot. That's true.
Oh.
that's
Damn it, Ryan. You okay. I have always looked to you to be a competent researcher. You kind of let me down here, honestly.
You didn't look her up in a YouTube interview or anything? Come on, man.
I'm
I'm
disappointed,
sorry,
I gotta tell you.
she's foreign. It's hard to get those names right because
Oh,
nobody
for
ever
fuck's
pronounces
sake.
them correctly.
I suppose you're
I
a
don't
fan
think you
of
can
Trump,
just say
too.
she's foreign. Okay, we might have to edit that out.
No,
So Nick, you usually ask for a movie recommendation. It sounds like you probably have a lot of them. So what's a good thing you've been watching lately?
Actually, I watched one recently called Ice Cream Man from 1995. It's Clint Howard. It's a god awful movie, but it's fucking hilarious, and I would highly suggest it because, yeah, there's no way to describe it other than a decapitated head inside of a giant waffle cone.
That's
My
all
third
you
birthday.
And Jan Michael Vincent as a drunk cop.
That
Oh, it's
helps too.
fantastic.
You know, Ice Cream Man was always one of those horror movies I saw at the video rental place that my parents would never let me rent. But like, I remember the cover. You know, he had like the ice cream cone. It had like the skulls or like the bloody eyeballs in it. Yeah. So
I remember an advertisement for it in like Fangoria.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's just, I mean, the thing about it is, it's not a terrifying movie, but it's not the movie. It's not the story that's terrifying. It's Clint Howard's acting and facial expressions that did me in.
I was gonna say just Clint Howard is terrifying. I mean, himself,
absolutely.
the way
he
he
tries so hard. Cut us some slack.
Although the kid's acting was pretty freaking cringe too. So if you calculate cringe with horror, that's pretty much right on too. So
awesome. And Big Ben, you were the judge. So what is the judge recommended for us?
Well, I finally got around to watching the Host, which is a film directed by the same guy who did Parasite. It's sort of a horror film.
More tentacles.
Yes,
more
there's
tentacles.
Yeah, there's tentacles, but it's a big thing. It's not like why are you always trying to tie me to tentacles and hentai, man? Leave me alone.
Oh, we're trying to? I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're tying.
But yeah, no, it's a great movie. It's sort of another one that's sort of cerebral in its the state of how people view their situation in Korea. And this one, like the Americans are kind of bad guys, so if that bothers you, you might not want to watch it. But sometimes we are the bad guys, and I think it's good to self-reflect. But yeah, no, The Host, check it out.
No, The Host is pretty sweet, actually.
It is, yeah.
I just caught Train to Busan. That was amazing too.
Oh,
yes.
That is amazing.
Oh
holy cow. Love that one.
You caught the movie or you caught the actual train?
Oh, well, the train was nice too, no doubt. You know, when you put aside all the corpses and blood. But yeah, I mean, the movie was, I hadn't seen it before. But yeah, just the subtle way they did vampires, zombies, and just it was just, it did everything right. And
just like me.
Yeah, just when you think like you've seen all the things you can do with zombies, this one really was pretty fantastic, I gotta say.
Yeah. Nice reinvention of a subgenre.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know I almost watched it. I believe it's on Tubi right now.
It's on Netflix.
Love Tubi.
On Netflix, yeah.
Yeah, so I
Tubi,
know I almost watched it the other day, and then instead I watched Slam Dunk Ernest. What are you gonna do?
Well, you know,
If
Can't beat Slam Dunk Ernest.
If you want another thing too, like someone pointed out to me that there's a series on Netflix called The Kingdom. And the way they described it, it reminded me quite a lot of the way that Train to Busan went, just in their portrayal of zombies and such. So that might be worth a watch too. It's an actual series, but it's supposed to be excellent in that same vein.
Well, that is a lot of things for people to check out. Check out Ice Cream Man, check out The Host, check out Train to Busan, check out Slam Dunk Ernest, and check out The Kingdom. A lot of stuff in there.
Slam Dunk Ernest.
Absolutely. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Anyway, so thank you for your time, Nicki. I hope you come back and play with us again.
Absolutely.
You know, everyone loses their first time. So
or in my case, you lose 3 times.
Well, yeah, 4th time's the charm for you, Ryan. But now you're out of your slump, man. So thanks for tuning in to the Reels of Justice, and we will see you next week.
Later.
Take care.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
And if you'd like to share your thoughts on this week's trial or the verdict, please email us at reelsofjusticepodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Twitter @reelsofjustice and on Instagram, reelsofjustice. Also, check out our Facebook page, facebook.com/reelsofjustice.